and welcome to today's Courage Talk on takethecourage.com. Today we are going to bring the two very inspiring and important topics together, leadership and courage. And for that purpose, I have got a very special guest. It's Daniel Jordi. Daniel is a leader, a founder, a creator, a mentor, a coach. I could tell you more, but I'm going to let it to Daniel to talk about himself a little more in a short while. Daniel, welcome, and thank you for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Daniel, let's talk about courage and leadership. But before, let's talk about you. Who are you and what is your story?
Sure. Who am I and what is my story? I would say at the very core, I'm really a connector, and I've always been a connector. I have a very easy way of connecting with people. It doesn't matter who they are. I have a very easy way of getting people to say yes to things, which is also helpful. And I have a very easy way of seeing connections between people and people and ideas, problems and solutions. So in whatever situation you throw me in, I tend to be the one that's making the connections. So that's sort of like the essence, I would say. And the very brief story, I'm Swiss. I come from a very traditional Swiss family. And very quickly, I've been thrown into a very international environment when I was about 19 years old, a little bit earlier as well, but when I was 19 years old, and I started my career, I had a half British, half Pakistani boss back then.
Okay.
My English completely sucked back then. And it was really interesting to have this incredibly challenging person as my boss. I think it was one of the most painful and valuable growth experiences of my life on a professional level. But it helped me a lot to get a lot out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
And just not think too much about myself and my insecurities, but just go with things. And I originally come from tech recruitment, so I spent about 9 years in tech recruitment, then started my own company in 2013 and did a lot of coaching, consulting, network building, all kinds of interesting stuff along the way. And then 2020 now, in August, I also joined a company called Ginetta. That's where I'm sitting right now in the office. So right now I'm basically sitting in two boats, so to say. I got my own company still, and then I'm also working with Ginetta.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in it. Of course, you don't talk about it, but I know what you have moved in the last years courageously, building up platforms with huge network and a lot of ideas on bringing together leaders in tech, for example, I think. Leaders Bridge, I think, is one idea. So a lot, which you, of course, just summarize very quickly. So it has really been, I have been watching you. You have been moving forward courageously. I think it's not only my view. A lot of people around you and your followers would confirm it. Okay, and how much of the role do you think has courage played in shaping your story so far in your life and work?
I mean, I remember like one of the interesting experience that I had was, I think I was about 16 or maybe 17 years old when I decided to go abroad for about three months. Decided to go to England and basically study English for about 3 months. And it was just like an overnight decision, and I went alone. So there's nobody. It was not like I just didn't, hop on a plane and go over there. Of course, I knew where I was staying and what kind of school I would go to, but I didn't know anybody, and I didn't take any Swiss friends with me, so to say. That was an incredibly great experience because I was completely outside of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
It was just an incredibly accelerated growth. So maybe this is an example where I just took that step Of course, I was partly afraid, but I saw more of the excitement, I guess.
Yeah.
I just, yeah, took the step. So this is certainly something. And then more recently, building Leaders Bridge and building the this network of digital leaders in Switzerland, that certainly put me out of my comfort zone quite a bit. And I guess you could say there were certain acts of being courageous in there. What I mean is, like, bringing those people together. Like one great example is we had this CEO collaboration day that I'm organizing. 25 people, very senior leaders, very experienced people. Some with very big egos and some with a little smaller egos. And everybody in the room, and from the beginning we always thought, how can we break the ice for everyone in the first half an hour? How can we just make sure that the whole thing starts with an incredibly great vibe? And my friend who helped me organize it said, we're gonna do an exercise, and it's called eye gazing. So what we did is, those 25 people, we lined up in 2 rows in front of each other, about maybe half a meter distance between each other. So definitely not Corona control.
Not Corona time.
That was made before Corona. And we lined those people up, and we had them stare into each other's eyes without talking for 4 minutes. And then we switched it around and did it again. Now, 4 minutes doesn't seem long, or doesn't sound long, but when you're standing there, 4 minutes feel like an hour. And it was incredible, because I was so scared about doing it with those people. Like, what are those people going to think? Now there's another guy coming and trying to do a team building exercise with those CEOs and with those leaders, right? But everybody, or almost everybody, incredibly appreciated it. But in the beginning, before I did it, I was like, this is just going to be a complete disaster. People are not going to be in it. They're going to be walking out of the room or whatever, They're going to hate me for doing this. And then we just did it. And it was an amazing experience for everybody. And also for me, because now doing something like that, I don't even think about it. I don't even think about what are people going to think if I do something. I just don't care. I just care very little, because I know even if they don't like it, it's going to have an impact. I remember one guy walking up to me after the exercise, where I talked to him, and he said, how is it so far for you? And he said, it's been good, except for this eye gazing exercise. I really, really hated it. And at the same time, I really loved it, because I can't remember when I stood still for 4 minutes in the past 20 years.
Wow.
Okay. So yeah, stuff like that I really, really enjoy, and it's scary sometimes. And it's also scary for me sometimes to go meet those people face to face, because especially when I put their title in front of them, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If I see them as human beings, I couldn't care less. And that's most of the time the case, but sometimes I fall into the trap of putting their title in front of them.
Yeah, these titles, these are kind of our protectors. Yeah, it's nice talking to you about this kind of experience, because you have done major things as well, getting out of the corporate life and setting up your business and all these big things you have done. You don't mention those. So what is courage for you then?
Say again, what is courage?
What's courage for you? How would you define courage?
For me, I guess, so one aspect is doing something I'm afraid of. And then I would say another level is doing something because I'm afraid of it. Mm-hmm. So one level is sort of like doing something even though I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Another level to me is doing something simply like for the actual reason, because I'm afraid. like because I'm afraid, because it scares me, I'm actually going to do it.
Yeah.
To me, that is actual courage. And one of my coaches talked about this a lot when we worked together. It was this idea that at the end of the cave, often there's a treasure, right? But to get to the treasure, you have to go through the cave, and the cave is dark and it's wet and it's scary, and there's all kinds of scary figures in there, or at least it seems to be. Maybe nothing in there, but at least it seems like that, right?
Yeah.
But the only way to get to the treasure is go through the cave. And to me, that is actual courage, I would say. Looking at something that creates a feeling of fear almost, or being like, yeah, fear of being afraid of something, and then still doing it, or actually doing it because I'm afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, that is very different from looking at something and having a bad gut feeling. That's something very, very different. Because if I look at something and I have a bad gut feeling, that's not a good idea for me.
Mm-hmm.
Do that. But if I look at something and it makes me scared because of my limiting thoughts and because of all the mental limits that I put onto it, that's a good thing for me to pursue. So for me, that is courage.
Wow, a beautiful example, the one with the cave. So fear is a kind of inspiration for you to go through it?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. Because I know from experience, if something scares me and I go through it, I grow exponentially.
Mm.
So, and I'm a growth addict in that sense. And because I know I come out better at the other end. And like, you know, it's not like you're gonna die along the way, you know, especially, you know, okay, it could be something maybe more physical that may not be the best idea, and that's really risky, but it's usually not about that. You know, it's usually more about our mental presence and our mental blocks. And so just because we do something that we're afraid of, even if it goes wrong, I mean, we're not going to be dead. You know what I mean? So,
Exactly. Yeah.
so what?
So what? Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of people just see the fear and they don't see the growing and learning through it. And that's what makes it, you know. I saw something, a statement of yours in your LinkedIn profile. You're saying as one of your guiding principles, every step I take, I always win, and so does everyone else. I find this a very courageous statement. So, do you need courage in order to do that, to always win? And if yes, how do you do it? How do you mobilize this courage every time?
Can I ask you a question first?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you feel it's a courageous statement?
I think it's really brave to stand there to say, you know, I always win. I mean, I find it really brave, and I really congratulations to standing there and saying that. It's not a matter of fact that you stand there and you're brave and say, you know, I always win. I mean, I have not really heard a lot of people saying that. But you're standing there and you're looking people kind of in the eye and say, I always win. For me, this is really courageous.
Interesting. The reason why I wanted to ask it is because I think, especially with this kind of statement, there's very different perceptions of what it means. Because to me, winning has two different aspects. Winning can be something material in a sense of achieving something or getting something or creating something material, like something tangible. But then winning on the other side, which to me is even more important, is the experience of winning. Even if
Okay.
I lose on the outside, I can actually experience winning on the inside. A very simple example is just because I fail at something doesn't mean I lose.
Okay.
But it could be felt as losing. It could also be felt as winning. So what I mean is, if I fail at something, I could say, okay, you know, it was a failure. I'm a failure. I lost. Or you could say, you know, I failed, okay, so I probably learned learned something interesting, and the learning is my win. What I mean by that, if I say I always, at every step along the way, I always win. That the reason I say that, and the reason I say every step along the way, is because not because I win and I achieve and I get everything I want every single time. Hell no, that would be awesome, but no, certainly not. But I try to create the experience of winning every time. I always ask, or I try to always ask myself, like, what did I win in this? Like, what did I learn in this? And, or how is this actually a good thing? And depending on what happens, that can be easy or it can be incredibly challenging.
Yep.
Go there. But to me, that is the actual growth. The growth does not come from achieving something or something materialistic, because the problem that I have is as soon as I achieve something, I go, oh, that's great, what's next? But that's not really growth to me. The growth comes from the growth as a human being, as a person, because then I have more capacity for experiencing the winning, for experiencing the growth.
Wow, that's very inspiring. I connected it automatically. I don't know for which reasons with the first aspect, and didn't go into your second. So wow, I really love it. Winning through growing, basically. Even if I fail, I grow, and everybody else as well.
Exactly.
I love it. Really good. Now, you have been working with leaders for so many years, and how much do you see courage as being the driver behind their success?
I think it's an important factor, because you know, once again, if I talk about being courageous, I talk about my own definition, okay? Because other people may have completely different definitions, but my definition of being courageous is you want to do something or you have an idea, there's fear, and then you do it anyway, or you do it exactly because there is fear. To me, that's being courageous. So in that context, I think it has a lot to do with being a great leader, because, well, most things are kind of scary in a sense. Like, you know, what if you make the wrong decisions? You know, what if you bust the company? You know, what if you get sued? What if you invest 20 million in a corporate venture and it fails? You know, what's going to happen with your head? Is your head going to roll? You know, yeah, right.
It's mostly about this head anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so much stuff, and then I think being courageous, I think has in this context has to do with not just ignoring these things, like ignoring or saying, okay, if we do this and it fails, my head is probably gonna roll, but I'm just gonna ignore it. I don't think that's courageous. I think being okay with it is courageous. Saying, I'm pretty sure, I'm 100% sure if we do this and it fails, my head is gonna roll, and I'm okay with that. Because I do it because I wanna do it, because I do it for the experience, because I do it because I know it's the right thing. And to me, that is courageous. And it's not about, I do it because it looks good on my CV, or I do it because I want another trophy. That's not courageous to me. Courageous is doing things for the right reasons, doing things because I believe it's the right thing to do, even if it doesn't make sense, even if everybody disagrees, even if there's a lot of risk involved. To me, that's being courageous. And I think great leadership has a lot to do with that, doing the right things just because it's the right thing and not because everybody thinks it's a good idea or whatever. And to me, that's courageous, because it tends to be that in situations like that, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes around. There's a lot of fears. There's a lot of, you know, risks. There's a lot of risks and perceived risks and everything that comes with it. So I think in that context, it has a lot to do with great leadership.
you know, doing the right thing at the time where you think this is the right thing. You know, you do your best to understand, is that the right thing? And then basically to do your best to achieve it. And risk is included in fear as well. And my next question in regard to, you know, which are your experiences in regard to what does hold people, leaders back from being brave. I think there's that a bit connected with what you just said.
So I mean, what keeps people back from being courageous?
Yeah, especially leaders.
Yeah, especially leaders. I think ego is a big one, because ego has very little to do with is it the right thing to do,
Mm-hmm.
and has a lot more to do how is this going to impact me. So is it going to look bad on my CV? Is it not going to give me the status that I need? So I think so ego is certainly something that I feel holds people back. But then also just putting a lot of weight on fear, you know, because if fear is the scary monster, yeah, of course, like the bigger the monster is, the less likely I'm gonna be doing it. But if fear is a motivation, now I go to the other extreme. Fear
Mm-hmm.
can be a scary monster. Fear can also be an actual inspiration, a motivation. And that's what I meant before. The way you look at fear and what you define as fear has a lot to do with how you act in moments of fear, basically. Because fear is not something I believe can be avoided or even eliminated. Fear is something that is so incredibly deeply ingrained in us human beings. I think, like Seth Godin said it in one of his books, it's not about eliminating the fear, it's about learning how to dance with it. And I think that is so incredibly true, because if we see the scary monster, like, no, I don't want to dance with a scary monster. I'm not interested in that. I'm afraid of dancing with a scary monster. But if I see fear as a motivation, as an inspiration, as something that I know, if I'm afraid of something and I do it, I grow. So it has a lot in this specific situation. It's very much related to me because I'm a growth addict. I love growing. So
Mm-hmm.
I understand that fear is a mechanism that allows me to grow. I embrace it. So that's very custom to me, but for other people, they may have different values. You know, if let's say somebody's core value is love, and in that context, if they understand, if I'm afraid of something, I'm not able to love. Well, of course, you know, that's a very different story. But if the context then becomes, if I'm afraid of something, if there is fear and I embrace that fear, I can love even deeper. Well, that's a great mechanism to go to your core value, or to live your core value even more. So I think what's holding people back is a lot of ego, status, me, myself, and I, that kind of stuff. But then also the real perception of fear. What does fear mean to you, and why? And what could it mean?
Yep. And especially because the responsibility is not only around them, it is all about the organization and the risk of responsibility towards the others. But nevertheless, it needs somebody who can live it as an example, you know. You are the leader, so go for it. It's so inspiring, you know, we can talk about it for hours. Let's relate courage with the future of work. So that's going to certainly bring, or is already bringing to all of us certain, especially to leaders, new challenges. Where do you see those challenges? And do you think those future leaders will need more courage? And in which ways, if yes?
So what do you mean by future leaders? Do you mean the next generation, the younger generation, or what do you mean?
So in general, those challenges are, yeah, those are different challenges towards any generation of leaders. So what do you think, yeah, how different are those challenges, and how is it related to courage?
So I have a feeling that there's more courage in general, and like if I just compare it with in terms of generations, I think there is less fear, in a sense of there's more just doing things and trying things out and taking risks in younger generations. That's certainly something that I see. And I guess it also has to do with, our environment. I mean, and that includes me, we grew up in an environment that was completely safe. Like there was no risk of war or even, anything like, there's no existential threat in our community really. So there's, very little of that. So I kind of like know that doesn't matter what I do, I'm not gonna die. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna be, I'm probably not, I'm probably not gonna lose everything that I have. So maybe this has something to do with it. But then, when we talk about the future of work, of course, I don't know what the future of work will look like, but if it continues to go as it goes right now, I mean, certainly I think we're all seeing is that it's less common that we are working side by side in an office. It's less common that we travel everywhere to meet people. It's less common that we have very formal structures. It's less common that we have 7 lines of bosses above us. So if that's the continuous change, then I think courage plays an incredibly important role in the future, because I believe if we just look at hierarchies and formal or more informal organizations, you need a lot less courage in a formally structured hierarchical organization to make decisions, because you can always blame somebody else, or you can always blame the board, you can blame the system, you can blame all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. But and this is what I find so fascinating in at Ginetta, we have a complete flat hierarchy. There's no boss, there's nobody in charge of X, Y, Z. We have roles and we have, teams, but there's no team leader, there's no project manager in that sense. Yeah, there's certain roles that go towards that, but there's no formal hierarchy. And in something like that, if you want something to be changed, first of all, if you see something and you want it to be changed, it's not like you can point out the person in charge and talk to them about changing it. If you want something to be changed and it's really important, then go change it, Mm-hmm. And if not, then don't. But if it's important and you want to change it, then change it. And that's what I find interesting. And but that also takes courage, also because it's not like we have unlimited amounts of time throughout the day, right? So we can embrace everything that we want to and need to. So we have to make priorities. You have to say, okay, that's important, that's not important. That's important to me, to the team, to the organization. And how is it in context with those 3 levels? So I think courage in that context has a lot to do with initiative and living with the consequences. Because, if, I'm working on a bigger deal right now, that I'm just seeing it's not gonna work. We're gonna probably lose money if we do it, but it would be really interesting to do it. And I can just say today I'll drop it, but then I have to think. I have that authority just to say I'll drop it. We're not gonna do this because of this and this reason. But then I also have to think about the impact on the company, on the team, on all kinds of things. And I have to think about the same thing if we actually do the deal. because that has an impact, and not doing the deal also has an impact. But I can't go to my boss and say, you know, what should we do? Because there's no boss. And even if there were, or somebody should be perceived as a boss, that person would say, I don't know, what would you do? So it's fascinating to me in such an environment, because you just have to make decisions by yourself. You can't delegate decisions upwards. You can't blame other people, because everybody is responsible for whatever they're responsible, whatever they want to be responsible for in that sense. And maybe this is something in the future that we'll have to have more courage.
This openness and this giving having responsibility, you know, each and every one of the organizations, so that encourages, or basically gives the right to everybody to be courageous.
Yeah, because we can't hide anymore. You know, it's really easy to hide in a big organization. You know, hide behind all kinds of things, and you can basically be completely useless for 10 years and nobody notices. You know, it's like, it's crazy.
Hide.
Yeah, it's crazy to me, but that's true. It exists very much. And I don't think you can do that in the future. I don't think that's going to work. It doesn't work in small organizations, and I don't think it's going to work in the future, because organizations will just not be structured like that anymore, because it doesn't make any sense. You know, the cost pressure is way too big for that to make sense and for that to be okay. In any, doesn't matter if we're talking in the industrial or private banking, it doesn't matter. It's just not going to be like that. So yeah, I think that's really something where people are going to be, or have to be, more courageous, because they have more responsibility, in a sense where they can take more decisions by themselves, or most decisions, or every decision by themselves.
Yeah.
And with every decision comes a consequence.
And that takes us kind of to the topic of culture of courage. So that creates already automatically kind of culture of courage, although, you know, it sounds so easy, but it's extremely you know, challenging to create a culture of courage. So culture of courage leads to business success. You agree with that? And have you worked so far with leaders who were able to create a kind of culture? And do you have an example on that?
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly tricky thing, also because what is culture? First of all, maybe, you know, everybody has a bit of a different definition of what is culture. To me, culture is not exclusively, but mostly, if we talk about company culture to me is mostly, not only, but mostly the sum of its people. What I mean by that is, you have 150 people, and there's personalities and talents and characters and strengths and all kinds of things, and the sum of it all is basically the culture. And of course you can shape it, but it's also basically very much based on the people. And when we talk about a culture of courage, to me, that is something very, very individual, because I can't just have a culture of courage as an organization and write that on my mission statement or somewhere and then have it. It only works if the majority of the individuals embody that. And it's easier said than done, because it's not like you take 150, you know, a bunch of random people, and then you say, this is the culture, let's embrace it. Because for some people, it's like, yeah, because that's who I am. Okay, great. But then I would say for the majority of people, this is not something natural. And for some people, it may even be or seem impossible. So I think if we're talking about a culture of courage, yeah, sure, this is something you can aim for, but then it has a lot to do with who you have in the organization. And it's not just who you have in the organization. I would say where it starts is who you are being in the organization as a leader.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I really believe change always starts with the one who wants to make change. So I do believe change is a very top-down thing in terms of where it starts, or where it's initiated, if it's strategic. Change can also start, you know, everywhere in an organization. But if change is something where this is what we want to create, a culture of courage, and the leader wants to create that, then the leader has to be the one that embodies it. I believe otherwise it's almost impossible to create it, because if the leader embodies this culture of courage, it can ripple through your organization, and it's going to inspire and encourage those who already live that and who want to live that, and it's going to push away the ones who do not want to live that. And it's people who want to live that. So the actual change of the organization is more organic than if it actually is lived top down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so and connected with that, I mean, courage can be lived from the top. Yeah, if those leaders stand behind the change and live the change and live the courage to also, you know, take risk and go through the fear and whatever, then everybody else would probably be able to also live it and create that culture together. I also know organizations who have courage in their values, but it's not lived. It's just, you know, let's be courageous. Nobody does it. So it's a shame. Yeah. Okay. And of course, you know, courage and vulnerability, those are the very two connected topics. And what do you think? Do you think that future leaders need to also be more vulnerable?
Yeah, I don't just believe future leaders need to be more vulnerable. I think in general, I would say it's a good thing for humanity to be more vulnerable, first of all, because, you know, if I take it in the simplest form of a small team that is supposed to work together, and there's no vulnerability whatsoever in that team. First of all, you can, if you sit in a meeting with that team, you can sense there's something not working. You maybe can't point it out, but you can sense something's not there. They're not a team. But really the first thing that you feel is they're not a team. They're 5 individuals talking to each other. That's probably one thing. So I believe for great teams and high-performing teams to work together well, vulnerability is key. And then, of course, what is vulnerability? Because we just had this conversation last week with a group of students, and it was in German, and then a German word, vulnerability, which I have a challenge with because it does sound to me very negative.
Yeah. How do you translate it? Verletzlichkeit, or how do you translate it? Yeah.
Yes. And to me, once again, you know, it's interesting because when we did this course with a group of English-speaking student, vulnerability was perceived as a very positive thing and something to strive towards. Mm-hmm. When we did it with the German-speaking group, it was something everybody wanted to avoid, because it's basic. If you are verletzlich, you get stabbed in the back, and that's it.
Yeah.
And vulnerability, to me, is not when you're vulnerable. Yeah, sure, you can be stabbed in the back. Yeah, but that you can also be stabbed in the back if you're not vulnerable. You know, you know, if you're not sitting in a tank, you know, you can be stabbed in the back. Yeah, but vulnerable to me just opens up possibilities, and one of these possibilities is basically the connect between people, because when I talk, or when I'm trying to get in contact with, or talking to, or meeting for the first time, these very senior leaders, one of my strategies actually is being vulnerable. To me, that's the easiest way to connect with them, the fastest, the deepest. Because if I'm not, what happens is if I have a shield in front of me and I go with that shield, or I show up with that shield, guess how they're going to show up?
Mm-hmm.
Guess
You mean the shield, so I'm not me, you know, I'm somebody else.
shield of, you know, I need to protect myself. Guess how they're going to show up? They need to protect themselves, right? But if I show up with empty hands and no weapons and no shield, they don't feel threatened.
Mm-hmm.
You know? They actually realize, oh, interesting, and there's an instant moment of trust. Trust, not like a very deep trust maybe, but I trust you're not going to kill me.
Yeah.
You know, I trust you're not going to take advantage of me. I trust you're not just in this conversation to sell me something I don't care about. You know, and to me that is very useful, because I can just create very deep connections very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But also to me, it's not only the most useful and the most practical and efficient and effective way, it's also fun. Because to me, it's like, there's no fun in working with teams that are closed individuals and no openness or vulnerability.
Yep.
There's no fun in meeting with people, connecting with them, talking to them, if there's no certain depth. It's just like, it's boring, it's not interesting. I don't even know how to deal with that. And sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes I encounter that, and it's incredibly difficult for me. And sometimes it's very difficult to break through that shield.
Yep.
But it's interesting that what I found really, really interesting is the bigger somebody has of a shield, when you get to break through that, the connection that you have is just even deeper.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because most people never get to break through to that. If it's really, really strong, that shell or that shield. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important for everything.
Yep. It gives you this permit, this access to within, you know, to get this real connection, and this is what counts. And as you say, you know, if leaders are running after their ego and care about how they look like and who they are, I mean, they're not going to never get at that level. And that's why then this connection will not happen with the organization. And that's why then the leadership will not be, you know, this kind of a deep leadership as they could profit from. Yeah. Yeah, it's very an inspiring topic. Let's be it at this level now and get back to you. My second last question, do you have a role model, Daniel, a person who inspires and encourages you through your way? Not to give up, to go through the fear.
Yeah, I would. I mean, there's sort of like very distant kind of role models, like, you know, I mean, Seth Godin, Richard Branson, sort of like the typical types of leaders, I would say, that everybody would mention, I guess. But then, you know, somebody that I recently met, that I keep being impressed by, especially when it comes to making decisions and just standing his line, if that makes any sense, is actually the founder of Ginetta, Simon. Because like when it comes to making decisions, I don't know if I've ever met anybody like him who makes decisions so much based on gut feeling.
Really?
And not like small decisions, but like really, really big decisions. like decisions that could basically that are incredibly risky, I would say. And with that, what I find also fascinating is how well that has worked out so far. it's incredibly interesting because, you know, most of the people I talk about, I don't work with, or talk with, I don't work with, right? Like directly in a work relationship. So it's sometimes difficult because you can talk a lot about making gut decisions, and you can talk a lot about this and that, and a lot of people can talk a lot about a lot of good things, right? But then the way people act is sometimes or often not the same as they talk.
Yeah, walk the talk, you know.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is like sitting in the same boat with Simon and seeing that firsthand. So it's not even something he talks about. He's not like, you know, talking too much about these kinds of things or at all. He's more of a doer. And that's what I find really, really interesting. So if it comes to decision making, for sure, and just having his clear line of what he believes is right and making decisions based on that, no matter what, to me is incredible. And yeah, it's just like, I remember we had this conversation out on the terrace over a beer, and we talked about the foundation of a company. And I said, well, basically, a company in the foundation needs to be profitable. If a company is not profitable, it's not sustainable. And he said, no, that's not right. In the foundation, a company has to deliver excellent or just like perfect quality. Like a company just has to be, it just has to like, it just has to create the maximum value is maybe the right word, the maximum value for its customers and for its employees. And then profitability is a side effect of that. And I was like, wow. Because that's what he believes. It's not about profitability. Profitability, interestingly, is, I'm seeing that now very well, is actually a really nice side effect of having a very clear line in that. And that's something I find incredibly fascinating. Yeah, so there's the distant people and then the more close people.
Okay, so that's always good to have the kind of people around us, no? And what about the future, Daniel? Are you having career visions or otherwise visions in life which you where you would need courage to realize them? Big visions.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's interesting how things have changed for me as well, because I always used to have these long-term visions of what I want to achieve and where I want to go and who I want to be. And recently, maybe it's connected to having a family, but recently that shifted a lot more to just being grateful, to gratitude. Sure, you know, I always want to grow. I always want to become better, but it's become less of like an incredibly ambitious or obsessed ambitious vision in a sense, and it's become more of a state of gratitude. And there's always things that I'm striving for and I want to improve, but most of the time, or my experience now, what I've seen is I'm actually happier and more fulfilled if I'm simply in a state of gratitude and know I'm growing. Yeah, I'm growing. I have certain things, but it's not like, you know, I have these huge, crazy visions at the moment. Maybe that's going to change again, but right now it's more about, I'm actually incredibly happy where I am, how things are, and I'm incredibly grateful that, you know, even in times that we're having right now, everything is amazing. Yeah, it's a lot more gratitude, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question better.
I think there's a perfect answer. I love it. To just decide for gratitude and say, that's going to take me further with, connected with my growth. And I don't have to talk about ambition and I don't know what crazy visions. This is what is right for me now. And that doesn't have to be connected with courage. Or it can be, because it needs courage to just sit there and say, you know, thank you for what it is now. A lot of people that can't do that. Thank you so much, Daniel. That was really inspiring to talk to you about all these aspects. How could people connect to you, those who feel inspired to get to know you, or yeah, to
Yeah, I
work
mean,
with you in a way?
yeah, I mean, easiest is always on LinkedIn. You know, just search me on LinkedIn, Daniel Jordi, and that's always the easiest way to connect. And just thank you so much. It was a great pleasure talking to you. I love the question that you asked. I love how deep you go into these topics and conversations, and I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Dory.
Thank you, Daniel. Let's be in touch.